Climate action today is a global issue, and any company that doesn't meet the standard will face the consequences, the economic consequences of these activities at the global stage. And so I think today being climate conscious at the corporate level is not a political decision. It's not even a marketing decision. It's a smart business decision.
Carbonsations, today's carbon industry leaders.
Welcome to the Carbonsations podcast, where we speak to some of the leading figures in the emerging carbon industry. Our guest for today's episode is Eyal Harel, CEO and co-founder of the BlueGreen Water Technologies, a company that is tackling the issue of water safety while also removing CO2 from the atmosphere. Eyal, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm excited about the conversation we're about to have and really can't wait to get into what and how exactly BlueGreen Water does. But before that, as you may know, we first like to get a good feeling of what our guests used to do before entering the carbon industry. So with that, Eyal, the floor is yours. Please do share with us what your life looked like before you decided to start removing CO2 from the air.
Hi, Violet. Thanks for having me. Very excited to be on your podcast. About my life before BlueGreen was much less exciting. We make water safe. So we've been working on this in the past 11 years quite extensively to be able to develop the first line of products for lakes and oceans. So rehabilitating water is what we do and what we take pride of. And it feels like a little bit everything else was never as interesting. So before, by training, I'm a lawyer. I studied East Asian studies. I have an MBA from Hong Kong, HKUST. Came back to Israel, started working in a big law firm, and then moved to start my first venture, which did technology transfer transactions for pharmaceutical companies. We did the first Sino-Israeli transactions. So I was very much involved in the high-tech and biotech industry and doing cross-border technology transfer transactions. And that was nice. But then about 12 years ago is when my older brother, Dr. Moshe Harel, who recently before that completed his PhD in environmental microbiology, came to me with an idea. And the idea, it was something that he came up with together with two of his mentors from his doctoral program in the Hebrew University, Professor Aaron Kappa and Professor Sergey Brown. And they were researching these toxic bacteria that has been on Earth ever since the beginning of all times, about 4.5 billion years ago. And the reason why we're breathing oxygen today. So really some of the building blocks of the world as we know it. And those bacteria are everywhere. North to south, east to west, literally everywhere. They can be found in water, they can be found on the desert crust or in permafrost, everywhere. And under normal conditions, they coexist with many other organisms, but under certain pollution, global warming conditions, they start erupting to form what's known as harmful algal blooms, where at the end of the scale, they will turn the water, lakes and oceans into dead aquatic zones. So this is an environmental catastrophe turned humanitarian catastrophe turned economic catastrophe. It's really, really bad. And it's all over the world. And in the last couple of decades, it's gone really, really bad, covering some 60 million lakes and 30 million square kilometers of ocean. And their idea, and we can go into exactly how it works, but putting it very, very simply, their idea was what I call either stupidly genius or geniusly stupid in its simplicity from a conceptual perspective, which is when they introduced it to myself and to another partner that I brought in, and together we literally went to write our first patent. And that was the beginning of BlueGreen. And fast forward, we learned through a lot of trial and error that we were able to identify kind of a self-destruct button mechanism within those toxic communities that, when pressed in a smart way, causes the entire toxic population to undergo a collective suicide. They kill themselves. Scientifically, it's called PCD, or programmed cell death. They kill themselves. And that was very, very exciting because at the time, we're talking about 2013, 2014, at the time, the idea that that is happening at all was kind of reserved to only a few labs around the world in experiments in microliter. And we were showing this happening in full scale in actual lakes. And today it much better established scientifically how it works and why it happens. But at the time, this was really um, the closest thing that science has to offer is magic. The ability to control the entire bacterial population in an entire lake within hours to days. And so this is how this whole thing started. But you know, you asked me how I came about this, and this is a very long way to say this. For the longest time, it was very, very difficult to raise money in an environment that doesn't exist really. I mean, nobody has ever really developed products or solutions for source water, for lakes and oceans. And so for the most of the time, at least initially, it was mostly investing money, never taking money back. And my wife used to ask me, when am I going to take a salary? And I used to tell her, Blue Green is a hobby, and you only invest in a hobby. You don't expect to get money back. So that's why that was a long way to say it was much less interesting before than after.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Actually, yeah, that is why you're here, really. And I really do want to get deeper into how your technology works, what makes your approach special, and yeah, how it essentially removes CDR in the process. So please do share with myself and our listeners more about your fantastic approach.
Awesome. So let's talk about climate change for a second, okay? So when we're talking about climate change, we're talking about two, maybe three fundamental pillars. The first one, of course, is the balance of greenhouse gas in the atmosphere. The second one is the loss of biodiversity in natural habitats. And then the third one, of course, is the issue of water, water quality, water availability that is deteriorating around the world. And what's interesting in what we're doing, or in the space where we are active, is that it kind of the lowest common denominator of all the above. Let me try to explain to you how they all really connect. So when we're talking about harmful algal blooms, at the core, we're talking about a problem with biodiversity when a single toxic microorganism, a bacteria, is taking over the entire ecological niche. And like I said before, ultimately turning entire aquatic ecosystems into a dead aquatic zone. So this is a problem with biodiversity, right? Now, at the same time, they're doing a couple of very interesting things that are all associated with the balance of greenhouse gas in the atmosphere. How so? So I told you that cyanobacteria has been around for 4.5 billion years. They are responsible for photosynthesis, and they're kind of the forefathers of everything green on Earth. And they are the reason why we're breathing oxygen today. So 50% of the oxygen we're breathing approximately comes from water, where microalgae represents about 0.5% of all green organic material around the world. So if you think about, oxygen on Earth, and normally the first thing that comes to mind is the rainforest, and you need to think again, because really way, way, way more efficient than trees are these little microorganisms called microalgae that is in water doing photosynthesis just like trees, only way more efficient. And they generate 50% of all the oxygen we have on Earth. Now, on the flip side, they're also very, very efficient in building up biomass, so they can multiply in biomass. Microalgae are responsible for almost 50% of the production of oxygen. At the same time, they know how to build biomass in a very efficient way by using a lot of CO2, of course, because the equation of photosynthesis is 6 molecules of water and 6 molecules of carbon. So you can imagine there's a lot of water in water. And because there is a lot of carbon in the atmosphere, there's also a lot of carbon in water because water is a natural regulator of carbon. So put that together, The excess amount of carbon in the atmosphere, most of it ends up in water, and it acts in water as a fertilizer for those algae to thrive. And that's when you get algae blooms. That's what causes biodiversity in water to collapse. So both things are linked. And at the same time, of course, we're seeing all sorts of phenomena. Some of them are a little bit more beneficial, but otherwise very, very problematic. For example, the ability of those microalgae, A, to absorb a lot of carbon, but B, also to release methane and nitrous oxide, two very potent greenhouse gas into the atmosphere. Methane is about 30% the global warming power of carbon, and nitrous oxide nearly 300 times the global warming power of carbon. So overall, you understand this is a cycle that closes the loop between greenhouse gas, the loss of biodiversity in large scale in water, and as a result, the reduction in water quality in all of those natural ecosystems in lakes and in the oceans. So this is kind of the background of how these ecosystems interact with each other. So when we go back to BlueGreen and what BlueGreen does, remember our initial mandate had nothing to do, at least not directly, with greenhouse gas. Our mission is to make water safe. The way we do it, as I mentioned before, is by developing novel formulations and capabilities that allow us to trigger what I mentioned before, a biological chain reaction within those toxic communities that is causing them to undergo a collective suicide. And by doing so, we control the dominant toxic species in the water. They drop very fast. Within hours to days, they drop in number. And as a result, what we are going to get is beneficial non-toxic species taking over the ecological niche, which is a very healthy process, recreate biodiversity, and with this, improving water quality and everything all the good stuff that comes with better, safer water. But there is a flip side to that, a very beneficial flip side in the context of greenhouse gas balance. When we're able to do what we do, we are able to achieve two byproducts. The first one is regarding carbon dioxide removal. So I said before, harmful algal blooms are very efficient in taking up a lot of carbon, generating a lot of biomass. So when you go to a contaminated lake, you see this very, very typical cyan green color in the water. That's all bacteria you can see with the naked eye. That means that there is a lot of biomass in the water. And when we're able to do what we do, which is to cause this entire toxic population to collapse, we're basically able to remove a lot of that biomass in a natural way. Because what will happen to this biomass, it will sink to the bottom. Part will biodegrade, we ignore that, but the other part, approximately 50% on average, will compact into the sediment and will remain there for all eternities until in millions of years it will turn into oil or natural gas, which is how oil and natural gas were generated in the first place. So it's kind of putting the genie back in the bottle. So this is one aspect, which is carbon dioxide removal. At the same time, I mentioned, and this is very recent discoveries in the scientific community, is that through photosynthesis, these microorganisms are also able to generate a lot of greenhouse gas, such as methane and nitrous oxide. They're turning these contaminated water bodies into sort of greenhouse gas chimneys. And that is very, very problematic, obviously. So when we're able to control the algae bloom, we can reduce the amount of greenhouse gas drastically in the process of improving water quality. And that is, again, another benefit that we can generate by reducing other greenhouse gas from being emitted into the atmosphere. So overall, if we're looking at this from a holistic perspective, by basically fixing a problem with biodiversity, we are able, A, to remove a lot of carbon. We're able to reduce the emissions of methane and nitrous oxide. And at the same time, of course, we're able to improve drastically the quality and the availability of water in the ecosystem.
That's amazing. And it seems to hold true for a bunch of different ecosystems. Like if you improve biodiversity, that inevitably affects the carbon cycle in a beneficial way.
True. This is something that we've been advocating for a very, very long time. Climate is complicated, and everything is connected, right? And this is one of the things that I think is very, very important. And I think the world is starting to have this conversation because you have conversations around greenhouse gas and carbon removals, and then you have completely different conversations around biodiversity, and then you'll have completely different conversations around water quality or around you know other ecosystems. And my concern is that more than not, you see these conversations never converging, and ultimately everything is connected. Everything in nature is connected. Everything has a reason and a purpose. So for example, if somebody would suggest that planting trees reduces carbon, so obviously that would be the case. But then if somebody, let's say, would suggest let's plant a rainforest in the middle of the Sahara, from a carbon perspective, that would be a good idea. From an ecological perspective, that would be a horrible idea, right? Because we need our rainforests, but we also need our deserts. And so this is just kind of an exaggerated example of how these conversations must converge and how everything influences everything else. And we need to look at those ecosystems holistically.
Absolutely, yes, I fully agree with you. On a slightly different note, I also wanted to get like a better understanding of your existing projects. Where are they, first of all, and how many do you have, and what removal capacity is BlueGreen Water Technologies dealing with at the moment?
So this is where things are getting really, really exciting. So it took us a while to register our first methodology for quantifying carbon removals of organic carbon in water through harmful algal bloom mitigation. And we completed that. It was March of 2023. And then, we thought, let's try to do a full end-to-end carbon project. So we've been in the market cleaning up water bodies since 2018. We've done thousands of commercial applications in Israel and the United States, in China, in Ecuador, South Africa, other places. And but we've never done a carbon project. And a carbon project in that sense is the same thing, only more complicated from a bureaucratic perspective. You need to bring validators and verifiers, third-party labs, sample takers. There's a lot of stuff to do around that. And then, of course, there is the planning of the project and kind of putting together an entire operational plan around that. Now, normally, it normally takes years to plan a carbon project and years to execute. And we were able to do our first carbon project. It was in Utah, in Manaway Reservoir. It's about an hour north of Salt Lake City. It took us about 6-7 weeks to put everything together. I mean, everything, writing down the PDD, bringing in the VVB and the third-party sample takers, and getting the regulatory permits from the local regulators. Because remember, we're working in water, and water is a hyper-regulated environment. So you have to get a lot of agreements from many different stakeholders, and then signing an agreement with the local authorities. And all that took us about 6 to 7 weeks to put together, which is record time. So this is, and we're talking about Manual Reservoir. It's worth noting this is a heavily contaminated lake of 500 acres or 2 square kilometers. It took us, the treatment itself started on September 25th, 2023. It took us a couple of hours to treat the lake, and that was it basically. The lake started improving in quality within hours, and it was completely clean within 10 days. So we basically called off the project, or called it completed by October 5th. The water was clean. And when I'm saying clean, I mean, it's a podcast. We can't show pictures, but I mean, you can't mistake. You don't need to have a PhD in limnology to understand what just happened. You basically see the difference between thick green, ugly water to transparent all the way to the bottom. That's the difference, and it happened all together within 10 days, and water quality continued to improve weeks and months after the treatment. Again, because basically this is nature doing its own thing. This is biodiversity reestablishing itself. And so this was the project. It took us a couple of hours. It took us another couple of months to complete, again, the bureaucratic aspect of validating and verifying all the emissions that we were able to remove in the context of that project. And by April of 2024, we were able to certify nearly 13,000 tons of CO2 equivalents. This is just from organic carbon removal. This is not taking into consideration inorganic carbon, not taking into consideration the reduction in other greenhouse gas like methane and nitrous oxide. So this is just the organic biomass that was removed. And I'm saying this is very exciting for two reasons. First of all, because of the potential. If you look at the overall capacity of the world in 2023 to generate high quality carbon credits, according to CDR.FYI, it was something in the range of 130,000 tons. So the whole world throughout the entire year was able to generate 130,000 tons of high quality carbon credits. We did 10% of that in a couple of hours on September 25th. That was it. So when we go out and we try to calculate what's the potential of carbon removals globally, we're looking at the global problem of harmful algal blooms, then it's in the many, many gigatons in fresh water and in dozens of gigatons in the ocean. It's that much, which means two things. The first thing it means is that through harmful algal bloom mitigation, we actually have a shot at reaching net zero, and I would even argue beyond net zero, meaning reversing climate change, if we tackle the problem as a whole. But not only that, equally, if not more importantly, we are able now to go to underserved communities that suffer tremendously, they suffer most from issues with water quality as a result of harmful algal blooms and other problems. We're now able to go to these communities and we can offer them lake cleanup for free. It doesn't cost them anything. All we do in the process and the way we finance the process is by generating carbon credits and selling those in the voluntary and compliance markets. And this to me is the key thing here, because remember, I mean, we didn't start off as a carbon removal project developer. Our mission in life, ask anybody in the company, we make water safe. And what we always wanted to do was to bring our solutions to those communities that otherwise could never pay for those solutions. And the carbon markets basically give us a financing mechanism to bring our solution to these communities. And so what we're working on right now is putting together a global campaign where we are partnering with governments and with NGOs and with corporates to do what we call maximum impact projects, where we go to those communities that need our solutions most, provide them with all the support that they need in order to rehabilitate their aquatic ecosystems, improve their water quality, improve their water availability, and all the good stuff that comes with that. And at the same time, being able to generate a lot of carbon credits, which can finance these projects and improve the overall carbon budget in the atmosphere.
That's an amazing endeavor. I'm truly very impressed. Well, since you got into the subject of carbon markets, I was curious if you could share a little bit more with us as to the process of how you get those credits sold. I know that the close to 13,000 tons of CO2 equivalent that you said in credits were part of a pre-purchase agreement. Could you tell us more about this deal and if you have any of those, more of those lined up right now?
Yeah, so basically we're working today in multiple tangents in order to accommodate different potential stakeholders in the space. So again, as I've mentioned before, our motivation is to make water safe, and we're starting to put together a list of partners that are joining us in the mission of making water safe around the world. Now, and that means that in addition to the registry where our methodology is already registered, which is Social Carbon out of the UK, we're now working on new methodologies with Gold Standard, Vera, just filed with UNFCCC under Article 6.4. We also have, we're also making interesting advancements under Article 6.2 with different countries around the world. And so we're trying to establish the sweet spot for different potential buyers within the voluntary carbon market and the compliance carbon markets, so that, everybody can benefit from what we do. It's a long way. It's a long way, and we only started. So I can't say this is satisfactory at this point. We don't have enough demand for these carbon credits yet. This is our mission right now, to be able to create a value proposition for all of these different stakeholders so that we can generate enough demand, which will allow us to move quickly and start cleaning up water in different places around the world as quickly and efficiently as possible.
Well, it's certainly a very promising start. I'm curious, like demand aside, what are the main challenges that you guys have faced so far, and how do you overcome them?
Oh, where to start? Okay, so water. Water is a fast-changing, chaotic biological environment. When we started BlueGreen, I used to go around and talk to investors. It's very, very difficult to invest in something where there are no comparables. Right. So you don't know what the market is and how it's going to evolve, and nobody else has tried this before. And so you don't know what you don't know. This is complicated. Now, add to that the fact that we are literally in a situation of a blue ocean. So on the one hand, there is a huge problem out there in the form of harmful algal blooms. At the same time, nobody has ever budgeted a lake and put a budget line next to it, which says to clean the lake. So it's very, very difficult to talk about, the market, the value proposition, valuation of the company, all sorts of questions that investors like talking about in that context. And so we had to really, bootstrap the whole thing from the beginning, with a lot of people that were very, very committed, whether volunteering for the company, as we all did as management, or whether through angel investors and whatnot, to support us in the process and really put us on track to this point in time where we're really making very, very dramatic change in the space. So you asked me about challenges. The number one challenge was fundraising, and I'm happy to say that now, with a lot of experience that we have generated and traction in the markets, and recognition from many governments around the world, is evidencing the good work that we've been and the results that we have been generating around the world. So this is getting easier and easier now, though. But this was always a challenge. Then if in the beginning, when we wanted to come and intervene in a lake, everybody raised an eyebrow and we're very skeptical whether we can do it or not. I think by now, with so much experience, I think these questions are been put to rest, and I don't think I know today for us to move into new territories. Everything is so much easier. Our products are market approved in many, many different territories. We're certified by the NSF 60 producing drinking water, so we adhere to the highest standards in the space, and everybody appreciates that. So this is one aspect. Another aspect, and this is coming back full circle to the carbon credits, the carbon market, and all that, is how do you penetrate with something that is conceptually very, very different from everything that has ever been done before, right? So like in every market, you have trends, and somebody starts buying something, and then another one starts buying it, and then we come completely alone by ourselves with a new value proposition that nobody knows or understands much about. And how do we start a trend? This is something that we're still working on. It's not easy. It's not easy to sell something new in these markets, and everybody is very hesitant and careful. Sometimes for the right reasons, sometimes for the wrong reasons. But it is what it is. And so this is a big challenge. Now you have to remember that when you're dealing with nature, then by design and by default, you are in the world of guesstimates, right? Because one of the things that everybody likes having and everybody likes talking about is high quality, high integrity carbon credits, right? This is what everybody is after. But when you try to break down those noble statements into what they actually mean, that's when things are getting a little bit difficult. Because what does it mean quality? What does it mean integrity? And always when you're dealing with natural things, then you are in the realm of guesstimates. It's very difficult to say exactly how much biomass was in the water before treatment and after treatment. It's extremely difficult, and you can only model the rate of degradation of biomass in the soil after treatment. And so there are all sorts of questions. And if you ask people who are perfectionists and want absolute answers, then you will never be able to make a good approach with those kind of demands and requirements. At the same time, we're in a stage of emergency. I think everybody understands that, right? I mean, we are already overshooting our carbon targets. I'm talking about us as humanity on Earth. We need to take some serious measures in order to meet those. If we'll stick only to efforts that can generate absolute numbers, then the numbers don't add up. And so as a matter of policy, and I think the world is coming to terms with that, as a matter of policy, I think the world is starting to understand that we need to look into the nature climate solutions more seriously, because only those can generate the numbers in a relevant time frame that would maybe avert a disaster. And so still, these are conversations, all of these things are happening right now in real time, and these are things we need to be very diligent in explaining, in generating a lot of data in order to support every claim that we make. And this is our bread and butter right now. This is what we do. And I think we do it very well. I will just say that the important thing for me anyway in that conversation is that at the end of the day, again, because everything is connected, the ability to improve entire aquatic ecosystems is key here, because and this is what makes this conversation so much more attractive, at least to me. That when we're having those conversations with companies around, the carbon credits, the important thing here is that we provide something that is much more tangible than just a coin, which is a CO2 equivalent or a carbon credit. We generate something that you can actually, you can put a plaque next to a lake and say, we did this. And this is something that is very visible, very tangible, especially for the people that live and suffer from the results of a contaminated water body. And to me, this is something that is very important. The ability to connect all these dots to bring the carbon credits as a financing mechanism and support water cleanups around the world is a holistic approach to multiple problems that the world is facing in terms of climate change.
Absolutely. Eyal, pulling back away maybe from BlueGreen Water Technologies and what you guys do, wanted to get your take on the political and regulatory landscape of CDR at large, both in Europe as well as beyond its borders. How would you describe the situation currently, and where do you see it headed in the years to come?
I think the world is going in the right direction overall. I think everybody's seeing the urgency and the need to increase our capacity at removing carbon. I think where we're still lacking is on the regulatory side. It connects a little bit with what I mentioned before around, the different registries and different standards and all that. And the volatility, especially in the voluntary carbon market, which is the result of companies facing legal risk, legal exposure, and reputational exposure. If they buy the wrong type of carbon credits, this is something that we are all, as an industry, we're facing in the last couple of years. The doubt that was sown into these markets, and what is good and what is not. And I think the only way really to solve this problem is if and when the regulators start to put their weight in. And the way I see it is a little bit similar to the way the pharmaceutical was before FDA, and the way the capital markets were before SEC, to take the American example. But there are equivalents in Europe and in other places as well. So, before FDA, you had all these people running around, some of them, really providing real medicine, otherwise others just selling snake oil and whatever, or straightforward poison. And it was very, very difficult to distinguish. And so the cost of getting involved into that market was very, very high, and the risk was very, very high. To the point that basically the regulator stepped in and said, okay, we're stopping all this. Now we are going to set up the standards, and we're going to write the regulation. And if you meet the regulation, you're good. If you don't, you can't do business here. And I think this is something that has to take place in the carbon markets as well, simply because we're past the point where private organizations can take responsibility for the amount of money that we're talking about, right? I mean, we're talking about many, many billions of dollars, projected to turn into hundreds of billions of dollars, if not trillions of dollars. So this is a lot of money, and where a lot of money, there is also a lot of problems and potential corruption. So it's imperative that the regulators step in and start putting these rules in place. And it's important because once they do that, then the corporates that are engaged with offsetting will also have the comfort, the reputational and the legal comfort, that what they're doing is within the rules of the game. And when that happens, that will create the safety that they need in order to start engaging with this market in much bigger numbers, in quantities, and in volumes of cash that is needed. So this is one aspect that I think is very, very important. I think regulators I think they already are, especially in Europe, stepping in, and I'm expecting this only to expand to the point that the whole markets, the compliance and the voluntary markets will be fully regulated, and I think that would be a very good day when that happens.
Hopefully. And specifically about the United States, since now under the Trump administration, the US has changed its stance on climate change and climate goals. Do you see this negatively affecting the carbon removal sector?
Well, the US, being the biggest economy in the world, the federal level backing away from climate action is definitely not a good thing, right? It is a step backwards. However, I think climate action today is a global issue, and any company that doesn't meet the standard will face the consequences, the economic consequences of these activities at the global stage. And so I think today being climate conscious at the corporate level is not a political decision. It's not even a marketing decision. It's a smart business decision. And it's only going to get more so. And as a result, you're seeing that the leading companies in the world, by the way, that are engaged in the voluntary market, which is, as the name suggests, voluntary, are the biggest US companies. Again, because the issue of climate is already international. It's not local. Now, to be very honest, the US was never leading the charge as a federal government, was never leading the charge on climate. And to the extent that we can talk about leaders, those were more at the state level. And if we go 8 years, when was it? Almost 8 years backwards, when the United States moved out of the Paris Agreement, I think it was in 2017 or 2018, 24 states that are leaders in the climate space basically signed an agreement that at the state level, they will continue to pursue those targets, and they still do until today. And so when you're looking at this from the state level, so you have, of course, the big names like California, New York, and others, those will continue to do what they need to do. And so I don't think that there is going to be much of an impact, other than on the statement level. I think everybody is coming to terms that this is that climate change is something that has to be dealt with. Sometimes, in some places, some companies will need to call it in a different name, if you wish. And so we're starting to see companies are talking about, resilience or risk management, right? This is the United States, so everything is about money. And so how do we manage the risk of climate? And there are many risks, right? And in that sense, the United States is not immune to the results of climate change. We've just seen the forest fires in California, or we're seeing, the record number of Category 5 hurricanes that are blasting through the Southeast. There are real consequences for those climate events, and I think the decision of one administration here or there is not going to change that.
Okay, let's hope so. Eyal, I have one last question for you before we wrap up this episode, and that is, what are BlueGreen Water's plans for the foreseeable future? Are there any news that we should look forward to this year?
Yes. We are going to launch very soon our campaign. We call it Clean Water, Cool Planet. I mentioned this before. We're basically putting together governments and corporates and NGOs for some serious climate action around cleaning up water, generating carbon credits, and generally speaking, doing a lot of good in max impact environments, so mainly underprivileged communities. So this is one thing that we're putting together. Another thing, we're taking a little bit of a broader approach here, and this is still at the draft level, but I hope we can announce something sooner rather than later. We started looking at Africa being case in point as a whole, and we're basically asking ourselves, okay, since our solution is scalable, and we're looking at the overall global water problem in Africa, what would it take for us to clean up Africa's water? Now, I'm not talking about Victoria Lake or something like that. This is still time for us to do something of that magnitude. But let's talk about those places where a lot of people are being impacted by the smaller lakes, and for that purpose, we basically carved out lakes that are 1 to 50 square kilometers. And we were able to identify through our remote sensing capabilities approximately 1,500 lakes, which we would like to start with, that are 1 to 50 square kilometers, that impact the lives of 150 million people around the continent, and how we're able to change their lives by improving their water quality and water availability, and also what it means in terms of carbon removal and carbon reduction. So kind of to give you an idea, and again, we're still crunching the numbers, but generally speaking, we're talking about something in the range of 2 to 350 million carbon credits that can be generated from this particular action that would remediate harmful algal blooms at 1,500 lakes around the continent, and improve the water quality for 150 million people. So this is kind of something that we're looking into right now. Of course, this is something of a complete different magnitude than anything we've done before. From an operational perspective, totally doable. But then now, we need to put in the right network in order to allow us to make this size and scale of intervention. And I hope we can put together this coalition that will allow us to make this kind of a dent, real dent on the impact of climate around the world.
Excellent. That's a very hopeful message to be ending the podcast on. I'm glad for that. Eyal, thank you so much for the wonderful chat. I greatly appreciate you making it on the show today and sharing your insights with us. Your work is greatly, greatly appreciated.
Thank you so much, Bella, for having me.
If you enjoyed this episode of the Carbonsations podcast and would like to hear more conversations like this, please be sure to subscribe. We really appreciate the support.